Thanks, Steve, for your very kind words, especially about my invisibility as a Christian. Right, and thank you for all coming. So the topic is the Easter women, or who were the women at the tomb, and it's by Kevin Rogers, to me. All right. We believe we have good evidence and good reasons for believing that Jesus rose from the dead. But this view is, of course, contested. One of the main arguments against the resurrection is that the Gospel accounts for the resurrection contradict each other. A commonly cited objection is that the number and identity of the women at the tomb seem to be different in each of the Gospels. Thus it is argued the Gospels are historically unreliable and cannot be trusted. So my aim is that we have a good close look at what the Gospels actually say and consider them in the context of first century practices in writing biographies, because the Gospels are biographies about Jesus. So I'm going to present the information in a fairly open manner. It's not my intention to brainwash you. I encourage you to have a good close look and make up your own mind. So this is a structure of what I hope to cover. First of all, I'm going to present the objection as colourfully described by a man called Bar Ehrman. Then discuss what were the practices that were used in the first century in writing documents similar to the Gospels. Then we'll compare the relevant texts in each of the Gospels. And in conclusion, we'll try to answer the exam questions. Who were these women? What is their significance? And are the Gospel accounts historically plausible? This is a man Bar Ehrman. So I'm going to present the objection as described by this man Bar Ehrman. Bar Ehrman is quite a formidable man. He is a reputable scholar and holds a position as the James Gray Distinguished Professor of Religious Studies at the University of North Carolina. He specialises in textual criticism and historical Jesus studies. Amongst scholars, he's on the sceptical side. He has published many best-selling books challenging the historicity of the New Testament, including Misquoting Jesus, Jesus Interrupted, Forged, and How Jesus Became God. In his teens, he was a fundamentalist Christian who believed in the inerrancy of the Bible. However, he then entered into biblical studies, and during these studies he came to the conclusion that the New Testament contains numerous errors that made inerrancy untenable. Initially he adopted a more liberal view, but eventually the problem of evil caused him to become agnostic regarding the existence of an all-powerful and all-loving God, and he has since become an outspoken critic of evangelical Christianity. But before we consider his objection, I'd like also to show the other side of Bar Ehrman. He still has a strong yearning for what he's lost. So even though he is quite sceptical about the historicity of the Bible, he still maintains a great love for what he has in part rejected. And I'll quote what he says, it's on the board. I consider the Gospels of the New Testament to be four of the most beautiful, powerful, moving and inspiring books ever written. I love the Gospels. Their stories of Jesus' words and deeds have always been and always will be near and dear to me. Among other things, I've always strived to make the values they promote and the ethics they teach the centre of my moral life, and I encourage others to do likewise. For me, they are the most important books in our civilisation and for my own life. That's a pretty positive statement, isn't it? However, having said this, Bart has launched scathing attacks on the historical reliability of the Gospels. One of his most colourful attacks has been, it depends which Gospel you read. He has used this argument in various debates, and here it is. Who goes to the tomb? Is it Mary by herself or with other If with other women, how many women? And what are their names? It depends on which gospel you read. Do they find that the stone is already rolled away from the tomb before they arrive? Or does it roll away after they get there? It depends which gospel you read. Whom do they see? A man, an angel, two men, two angels? It depends which gospel you read. What are they told there? That they have to go tell the disciples that Jesus will meet them in Galilee? Or that they are to remind the disciples what Jesus told them when he was in Galilee? It depends which gospel you read. Do the women tell anyone? It depends which gospel you read, and so on. This shotgun barrage seems quite compelling and intimidating. You all despondent? Alright, good. We cannot possibly fend off all of the pellets in one short talk, and so I'll just concentrate on the first group of questions which are involved. Who goes to the tomb? Is it Mary by herself or with other women? If with other women, how many women? And what are their names? And does it depend on which gospel you read? Before we actually look at the gospels and read them, I would be helpful to actually describe the context in which the gospels were written. So I'll cover what were the limitations of ancient literature, what is the genre of the Gospels, and what are the Gospel source relationships. This should become clearer as I go through our part of these. First of all, the limitations of ancient literature. In our current day, we can get on our computer, fire up Google, put in a question, and get an answer. Anyone can be an instantaneous expert. And that's how I'm giving the lecture tonight. Okay. Surprisingly, this was not the case in the first century. Critics often forget this and lack sympathy for the context in which the first century authors wrote. Ancient authors were limited by expensive and clumsy writing materials. Copying was slow and expensive, and so books were extremely expensive and took a long time to produce. In my house, I have too many books. They're in my cupboard. I have to bring some along here to get rid of them. In those days, one book cost as much as a house. Thus, authors had very limited access to books and other information sources, and that access was limited to a privileged few. Travel was very slow. People often had to walk or go in ships. And this was an additional factor in slowing down book distribution. There was no shorthand notation for recorded speeches. Hence, historians, most of the recorded speeches that just reflected the gist of what a speaker said. There was no printing press, no photocopiers, no tape or video recorders, and no internet. Thus, authors wrote biographies in such a manner that was adapted to the limitations of their time. Therefore, ancient biographies are different from modern ones in their aims, their techniques, and the standards that they accepted. Before we consider the actual content of the Gospels, we should also consider their genre. So what's a genre? Genre addresses a question, what type of document is this? During the 20th century, this has been an intense area of New Testament studies. A general conclusion has been that the genre of the Gospels is Greco-Roman biography. So what's a Greco-Roman biography? This just means that they are biographies, which covers word biography, written in the same style as was used by Greek and Roman classical authors. Unsurprisingly, there is a significant amount of variation within this genre, so not every Greco-Roman biography would look exactly the same. They varied in their techniques. So it is a broad category, but there's still many common elements. One author has been particularly useful for understanding this genre. His name was Lucius Nestorius Plutarchus. but we'll just call him Plutarch. He was a Greek biographer and essayist, known primarily for his parallel lives. So what he actually wrote was he was Greek, he was in the Roman Empire, so he had a whole pile of Greek people, a whole pile of Roman people, and he kind of wrote one and the other and kind of compared the Greek and the Roman. I'm not sure what his conclusion was. He wrote numerous biographies called Lives, some of which perished, but many have survived either in part or in full. In particular, the lives of Lucullus, Cicero, Pompey, Cato Minor, Crassus, Julius Caesar, Brutus, Mark Antony, and Sertorius have been studied to obtain an understanding of ancient Greek and Roman biographies. So these are all prominent men. They're either emperors or leading figures in the Republic. One of the values of Plutarch's lives is that these biographies overlap to a large degree, and the same characters are often treated differently in each book. So you can compare how he's described the character here, and how he described the character there, what he dropped, how he changed it, and all those sort of things. In addition, the lives are similar in style to the Gospels. This is a huge area of study, so I'll just summarise the general conclusions. Ancient biographies have a significantly different style from 21st century biographies. Modern writers and readers focus more on a chronological sequence of events. So, what happened when and in what order? Okay? The ancient biographies focus more on the character and deeds of the subject. So, a chronological list of events is less important to the ancient authors. To convey the character and deeds of the subject, the author makes use of various compositional devices. So the devices for composition of the biography, which are generally not used today. Thus, it is anachronistic to judge ancient biographies by modern standards. So anachronistic is a big word. Ana means not, and chronos means time. So to be anachronistic is to take today's standards and judge another culture or another time by those standards. But they didn't have those standards then. So we should understand the genre to assist us in interpreting what they wrote before passing judgment on their historical reliability. Once this is considered, many of the objections become irrelevant. This slide lists common compositional devices, and I'll briefly describe them. The first one is transferal. Transferal is when an author attributes words or deeds to another person. One person's words or deeds to another person. That sounds pretty radical by our standards, doesn't it? Okay. Displacement. Displacement is when an author transplants an event into a different context. An example in the New Testament that I can think of is when Jesus clears the temple and turns the tables. So in Matthew, Mark and Luke, it is during the Passion. Where is it in John? Right at the beginning, isn't it? So John probably grabbed the same event to say something at that point. Conflation is to combine multiple events into one. Compression is to portray events over a shorter period. For example, Mark curses the fig tree on one day. In Mark, Jesus curses the fig tree on one day, and the disciples observe that the tree is withered on the next. However, Matthew says that the fig tree withered immediately after Jesus cursed it. So Matthew is compressing the narrative, and that was considered okay. Spotlighting. So this is just the same as when you have a spotlight on the stage and you focus just on one character. Spotlighting is when an author focuses on one person and ignores others who are present. The device is particularly relevant to our current discussion on women of the tomb. Simplification is when an author omits details that complicate the narrative. Detail expansion is a creative reconstruction of details to improve a narrative where the actual details are unknown. So sometimes authors invented stuff, but that was considered okay. Paraphrasing is where the author uses his own words rather than quoting verbatim. Matthew and Luke sometimes paraphrase Mark, because Matthew and Luke, or so it's believed, had access to a copy of Mark, and they used some of his material. So you can actually see how they use his material. Like, did they embellish it? Or revamp, or what? It was quite an interesting study. So Mark and Luke sometimes paraphrase Mark, but also frequently copy him word for word, whereas Plutarch paraphrased his sources far more frequently. This slide shows a picture of the relationships between the Gospels. So we have 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. Matthew, Mark and Luke are called the synoptic Gospels. This means that they see together because they're so similar. Whereas, so the synoptics share a lot of common material, whereas John seems quite independent of the other 3. So this slide shows a common view of the relationship between the synoptic Gospels. Most scholars believe that Mark was the first Gospel to be recorded, and that Matthew and Luke had access to Mark. Common material in Matthew, Mark and Luke is believed to be derived from Mark. Matthew and Luke also have common material that is not in Mark. So how do you explain that? Sometimes it's word for word, the same in Matthew and Luke. Some people suggest that one copied off the other, but that's generally not accepted. If you look at the interesting narratives, they're radically different in Matthew and Luke. So if one was copying the other, would that be so different? So Matthew and Luke have common material that is not in Mark. This is believed to be derived from a document called Q. Q is short for Quell. It still doesn't help you, does it? But Quell is a German word which means source. So it's just Q means source. So there you go. But we don't have this document. Nobody's ever seen it. And people argue over whether it really existed. But a common view is it did exist and has since perished. Matthew and Luke also had their own independent sources, which are imaginatively called M and L. Matthew and Luke, yeah. So we're now going to look at what the 4 Gospels say, so please bear in mind when we do this that Matthew and Luke probably knew what Mark had written. Okay? We have 4 accounts of the women, which are Mark, Matthew, Luke and John. I mentioned Mark first. These are 4 views from different perspectives. Short, sequential snapshots of parallel events. Thus, if we want to know what happened in the complicated events of life, then we should analyse 4 views and construct reality if that is at all possible. It would be an interesting exercise if we said, could you write an account of what happened when you came here and before the start of the meeting? And what happened to all people? You would have had things going in all directions, wouldn't you? It would be very difficult to describe. And this is only a very simple event. So to actually describe what was happening concurrently is quite a difficult thing. We'll now examine the 4 Gospels regarding the women during Jesus' ministry, at the cross, during the burial, at the tomb, and the appearances. And we'll tabulate the results in a matrix so that we can compare the information chronologically or in time order and also across the Gospels. And at this point, I've called on my lovely assistant, Joshua. Unfortunately, Anne couldn't make it tonight, and so Josh is more than adequate substitute. I'm very disappointed that he didn't bring a skirt. Right. So we're going to look at Mark. And in this first passage here, the context of this passage is during the crucifixion. That's true. And here we actually have, so Mark is recording who are the women who were at the cross. But he's also pointing back that these were also the same women who were present with Jesus during his ministry in Galilee. So when I say ministry, I mean when Jesus was going around healing, teaching, etc., while he's in Galilee. So here's the passage. There are also women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph, and Salome. I don't know how to say Salome. How to pronounce it. Is it Salome or
Salome?
Salome. Salome.
Salome. Yes.
Salome. Salome. When he was in Galilee, so here's a reference back to Galilee, they followed him and ministered to him. There are also other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. So we're actually going to put entries, both for ministry in Galilee and also cross. So the same information is going to be duplicated in this cell. So my lovely assistant has included Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James the younger and Joseph, Salome, and others. All right? Because Mark says there are also other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. And also the phrase there, among whom. So the list is not complete. All right, the burial. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where Jesus was laid. So this is after the cross. So we're back in Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph. Have you duplicated?
Okay.
All right, okay. No, all right. Then at the tomb, visiting the tomb on the Sunday morning. When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. Then appearances. Now when he rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. This is from Mark 16 verse 9. This one is a bit dodgy, okay? Because it is in the longer ending that is omitted from the earliest manuscripts. The earliest manuscripts stop at Mark 16 verse 8. And then we have a whole pile of extra stuff, and it's not in the early manuscripts. If you look at it, it looks as though it's very much a copy out of Matthew and Luke. So you've got the disciples on the road to Emmaus, and various other stuff, and basically the Great Commission, which comes out of Matthew. How are you going? You have Mary Magdalene, Mary, Mother of Jesus. All right, then keep going. Yeah, keep going. So there you've got Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Salome.
In that disputed ending of Mark, there's some other stuff that I don't think is in the Gospels, the can of snakes and not being killed.
Drinking poison.
Yes. Very strange.
Speaking other tongues.
Well,
that's mentioned elsewhere. Yeah. But a lot of people have died when they're stupid.
But it's
sorry?
He handles snake.
Yeah, he handles snakes, so that's probably where it was gone. Why they put it in is they drew on that story in Acts.
I just want to mention that not just trying to copy from the other Gospels, it's sort of other things thrown in there from things like having an Acts.
Right, okay. Now we will go on to Matthew. So how are you going?
Yeah.
You're right. Good. Okay. Now from Matthew. Ministry and cross. So we made a comment that Matthew has access to Mark. And so you have this, the ministry and cross is very similar to what you can find in Mark. So many women were there watching from a distance. So this is at the cross. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. So what are the differences there?
The light side is.
The last one had Solomon, didn't it? So here it says the mother of Zebedee's sons. And Mark had Mary, the mother of James the younger, and Joseph,
Which is probably the sister version, sort of the same name.
Yes.
It's Greek and
Alright, okay. The burial. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. So the other Mary, it refers back to Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. Then when they visited the tomb, after the Sabbath at the dawn of the first week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. So here we got Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Alright. Then the appearances. So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, where they will see me." Now it says the women, but all this is in both the tomb and the appearance are in Matthew 28. So the first one is verse 1, and the second one's verses 8 to 10. So the women is actually referring back to the appearance of the tomb. So that means it was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Right. Right, now we'll look at Luke. How you going? Getting there. Alright, okay. He's got a cheat sheet. So Luke provides us a specific passage about Jesus' ministry in Galilee. It's got, soon afterward, he went on through cities and villages proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him, and also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Chusa, Herod's household manager, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their means. Right, so that's a long list. Alright, at the cross. This is at the cross, during the crucifixion. And it says, "And all his acquaintances and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching these things." So that means we get the list that was described in Galilee and we copy it here for the cross. That seems fair enough? Then the burial. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. So this is the burial. So all my lovely assistant has to do is select the previous cell, say Control C, click into the next cell and say Control V. How you going on that?
Yeah, I can't find the keyboard.
Alright. Then visiting the tomb. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb. taking the spice that they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away, but they went in and they did not find the body of the Lord. So far, so good. And they remembered his words, and returning to the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, and Joanna, and Mary the mother of James, and the other women who with them who told these things to the apostles. And so said the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed like an idle tale, and they did not believe them. Luke doesn't mention any appearances to women. He talks about the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. So how are you going, Doc?
Good.
You always says things are fine, but I don't believe it.
Might there have been some women that were following Jesus around in the ministry phase in Galilee who had not done the next step, the next two steps of following him from Galilee to the Jerusalem area, and might have stayed back there?
Sorry, can you tell me again?
Maybe there were some people in the first group, to rephrase it, that were with Jesus in the Galilee phase of his ministry, who didn't do the next two, who went to the next two groups, because that they're described there as the women who had followed him from Galilee.
Yeah.
So there might have been women who hadn't followed him from Galilee, who stayed.
Yeah, it might have been,
Paul wants to speak to someone who doesn't stand.
Yes. That's what I'm thinking.
That they could have been here.
Went very travel.
My Baptist just died in this. Go to the mental technique. John at the cross. So this is from the Gospel of John during the crucifixion. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her to his own house. What do you think of the statement, "the disciple whom Jesus loved"? Who do you think that was? Yeah, that's the common interpretation. The disciple whom Jesus loved is the person who wrote the Gospel of John. And that was John, the son of Zebedee. Okay? Now that's something that a lot of people dispute, but that's a common belief among Christians, and it's kind of a conservative view.
Interesting debate in naming himself in his own gospel.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah.
That's like the names of a lot of the other disciples.
Yes.
By process of elimination, so he's referring to the third person to someone else.
Yeah.
So it can't be him.
It's carefully when he renaming himself. I don't know.
Right.
What else would somebody do?
John doesn't mention the burial, but he mentions the women at the tomb. Now, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, to the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they've laid him." So John seems to focus almost exclusively on Mary Magdalene, and this looks like a clear case of spotlighting. Right? Mary Magdalene is in the spotlight, but others are incidentally present, although they are not in the spotlight. Even they are not in the spotlight, as indicated by the word "we." Right? So I've included some paintings of Mary Magdalene here, and there are many fantastic classical paintings of Mary Magdalene, but they're all just fantasy. Some of them are quite sexy, but the fact is we know absolutely nothing about her appearance or her vital statistics. right? But she's kind of captured the imagination of a lot of people. And the one on the bottom right there is by Caravaggio. And this is the appearance to Mary Magdalene. But Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this she turned round and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realise that it was Jesus. "Woman," he said, "why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I'll give him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet returned to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am returning to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And they told them that he said these things to her. Right, okay, we've now got this table, so let's have a look at it. Grab some other pens. All right. So we've got Mary Magdalene across here. That's all consistent, isn't it? Then we've got the Mary, mother of James and Joseph. Mary, the mother of James the younger, and Joseph. So Joseph and Joseph are the same thing. Here we've got Salome and others. Here we've got Zebedee's wife and others. Here we've got Mary Magdalene, Joanna the wife of Chusa, not Chusa, Susanna, and many others.
Yeah.
So the others certainly makes provision.
Yeah.
Variation.
So, are they contradictory? Not at all.
It's all right.
I'll fix one.
All right. So, again, if we look at the cross, we've got Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, Zebedee's wife. This is a copy of that one. And here we've got this also a copy. And we've got this also a copy. And then John says Mary Magdalene, Mary the wife of Clopas. All right? His mother, so Mary the mother of Jesus. His mother's sister. All right? Can you see any conflict there?
Possibly John, because it does.
He's adding his mother.
Yes, he's adding his mother, which could be in the others.
She was looking.
But John doesn't use the word others, so therefore, where is Joanna, for instance?
All right.
Where is Salome?
I mentioned spotlighting, didn't I?
That's right. Yes.
It's about spotlighting. So just because they say, he doesn't say there weren't others, does he?
He does not.
But he's the one, he won't actually listen.
Salome is his mother's sister, and Joanna wasn't necessarily there. So just copy.
Yes, we'll start to get onto that and make some sort of observations. At the burial, it says Mary the Magdalene and the other Mary. So who's the other Mary? Mary the mother of James and Joseph, wouldn't it? Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Joseph. This is all a copy of it. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna, many others. Alright, so here we've got burial. So, like you might say, a potential conflict again, with because Matthew and Mark only mention two, whereas Luke's got an expanded list. Spotlighting. Yeah. At the tomb, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. And likewise for Mark. And this is interesting because Luke says Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James. All right. So the first time he's actually mentioned her explicitly, and it's showing agreement back with Matthew and Mark. All right. And then for appearances, Mary Magdalene, the other Mary, Mary Magdalene, Mary Magdalene. All right. Now you've probably noticed some interesting things, but Mark's the only one who mentions Salome. Salome. Right, sorry. And all right. So nobody else mentions it, but Matthew says Zebedee's wife. So is that a conflict? What's the possibilities there?
His wife is Salome.
Yeah, Salome could be Zebedee's wife.
Or Susanna.
Well, Matthew had a copy of Mark. Didn't see Luke. And what's the other thing here? It's got here Mary the wife of Clopas. What can you make of that? It might be the same woman. Sorry, no, I'm getting mixed up here. So we've got Zebedee's wife, Salome, his mother's sister. So what's the possibility there?
She's unlikely to be called a Mary because his mother's already called Mary, wouldn't have two of the same name.
Yes.
So it's probably.
So the possibility is that Salome is
Mary's sister.
Mary's sister, and also Zebedee's wife. All right.
It's James and John who are very close to Jesus.
Yes.
Which is possibly why we have such an almost intimate relationship between Jesus and
cousins.
God.
All right. So again, we'll look at Mary now. So you've got Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. Mary, the mother of James, the younger of Joseph. Others. Mary, the wife of Clopas. All right. So what's the possibility there? That she was that Mary, the wife of Clopas, is also the mother of James the younger and Joseph. Right. Okay. Oh. So that's the cheat sheet that Josh had. So we're going to talk about the other Mary. Right, by cross-comparing the Gospels, there are some interesting speculations. So what we've talked about is you can't prove it, and it might be wrong, but it's a possibility, isn't it? The things we've been saying. So if we cross-compare the second Mary, then it raises a possibility that the mother of James the Younger and Joseph was also the wife of Clopas. All right? Clopas is otherwise not mentioned in the New Testament, but he would have been known to the initial recipients of John's Gospel. So the early church fathers claim that Clopas was Joseph's brother. Maybe true, may not be true, alright? Nothing really hanging on it. Thus, Mary may be Jesus' aunt on his father's side. Salome. Mark identifies the third woman as Salome, and Mark is the only one who used the name Salome. Matthew knew what Mark wrote, but he refers to the third woman as the mother of Zebedee's sons. Zebedee's sons were the disciples James and John. John says that Mary's sister was also at the cross, where this Mary that he's referring to is Jesus' mother. So there's a possibility that this woman, Salome, could be the wife of Zebedee and the sister of Mary. So here's possible relationships, okay? And it might be wrong, but it might be wrong, okay? Thus Salome may be Mary's sister, the wife of Zebedee, and the mother of the disciples James and John. So Salome could be Jesus' aunt on his mother's side. So James and John could be Jesus' cousins. This explains why Jesus asked John to take care of his mother Mary. Okay?
Because of the family relationship.
Yeah. Also, Joseph, according to church tradition, Clopas was his brother. The other Mary is the wife of Clopas and the mother of James and Joseph. Okay. Women in Galilee across the tomb. So let's see if we can now answer the exam question. Who were the women who were with Jesus during his ministry at the cross and who visited the tomb? They were Mary Magdalene, Mary the wife of Clopas, Salome, Joanna the wife of Chusa, who was a manager in Herod's household, Susanna and others. How many were there? There were 5 or more, but we don't exactly know. So let's now have another look at Bar Eamon's challenge. Here it is again. Who goes to the tomb? Is it Mary by herself or with other women? If with other women, how many women? And what are their names? It depends which gospel you read. Are these questions as compelling and intimidating as they first seem? Who says yes and who says no? Who says that? On a closer look, the differences are not all that great and are easily accounted for if the gospel writers we use in the spotlight and composition advice. Anyway, how would an ancient respond? They would probably just shrug their shoulders and say, who cares and why does it matter? What matters? So does it depend on what gospel you read or how carefully you read the gospels? There are differences in the gospels. Each gospel mentions specific women or the same woman in a different way. Why do the gospel writers sometimes refer to different women? Perhaps these were the women who the authors used as their sources. The accounts of the women are not a liability but an asset, as we shall see. I have a picture there of Bloody Mary. Right, Bloody Mary is not in the Bible. She was a daughter of Henry VIII, and she executed lots of people. They didn't like her. And she was succeeded by Elizabeth I. But I'm using the term Bloody Mary in another way, okay? In the Gospel accounts that we've considered, there are at least 3 Marys. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, and the third Mary. Why are there so many Marys?
Miriam,
Yeah.
it's a common Jewish name.
Yeah, it's because 30% of Jewish women at that time were either called Mary or Salome. It is interesting that the third Mary is referred to in numerous ways, which are Mary the mother of James the younger and Joseph, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, or Joseph, Mary the mother of James, Mary the mother of Joseph, Mary the mother of Joseph, the wife of Clopas, or the other Mary. The authors want to differentiate her from the other Marys, and it all seems so ponderous that they resort to abbreviations. So if you actually go through it, you see Martha, does it in full first time. Mary, the mother of James the Younger and Joseph. That's the same. Then he abbreviates. Mary, the mother of Joseph. Mary, the mother of James. You look at Matthew. Got Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. He drops the younger. Mary, that's the same. The other Mary. Other Mary. So you can see that they're kind of winding it down a bit. So it seems as though this Mary's a bit of a nuisance as far as referencing her is concerned. So if you were going to contrive a story, would you contrive a story with so many Marys in it? If you were contriving a story, wouldn't it be easy to use different names for each of the women? So why are there so many Marys? It's because that was a historical case. Okay, you see the point? It's also been pointed out that by many people that in those days women had very low status. They weren't considered trustworthy witnesses in a court of law. And yet you've got this embarrassing bit that your primary witnesses are women. So what happened at the cross? The Gospels all recorded that the male disciples fled when Jesus was arrested. When Jesus was crucified, most of the male disciples were not there to observe what happened. So how do we know? It was the women who remained loyal and cared. They were at the cross, they witnessed the burial, and they cared enough to go to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body, whereas the male disciples were in hiding. So it was probably the women who are our primary witnesses to these events. So in conclusion, the Gospel accounts do not appear to be as problematic as the critics claim. The Gospel writers may occasionally limit the number of women listed to spotlight the key characters, or the same women may be referred to in different ways. The particular women mentioned may also be an indirect way of identifying those women who were the primary sources for each of the Gospel writers. The male disciples scattered, but the women remained loyal to Jesus. And so it's the women who are the primary witnesses of the most important events in human history. Little is known about these women. The details about their individual lives are lost, but their impact will endure forever. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, again, thank you, Kevin. And as I told you just privately before, I was thinking, what sort of difficult question could I ask to get the ball rolling? And then Kevin provided me one, which we notice in the first three of the Synoptic Gospels, there's no mention, a very rare mention of Mary. In fact, I don't think it is Mary, the mother of Jesus. So I'm going to ask him, does Mary, the mother of Jesus, appear in the Synoptic Gospels in what we've got there?
In other words, some people have speculated whether Mary, the mother of James the Younger and Joseph, was actually Mary, the mother of Jesus. Because Joseph and Mary had 4 sons and 2 daughters. Yes. And the 4 sons were James, Joseph, Simeon, and Judas. Or Jude. And the letter of Jude is supposed to be by a brother of Jesus, and so also the letter of James. So some people have speculated whether Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, is actually Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. So he does appear in the Synoptic Gospels.
Yeah, but it's thought that this is unlikely because she would have been identified differently.
Would have thought so.
Yeah, probably would have been called Mary, the mother of Jesus, rather than of James and Joseph. And others kind of speculated that, or maybe they were trying to play down the role of Mary and not people shouldn't put too much weight on being a relative. And so they kind of, in a sense, the relatives kind of distance themselves from Jesus. Like in the letter of James, James is supposed to be the brother of Jesus, but he calls himself a servant of the Lord Jesus Christ. He doesn't say, brother, I am the brother of Jesus. And when Jude writes this letter, he doesn't say, I am the brother of Jesus, he said, I'm a brother of James.
Yeah.
All right, so they tended to distance themselves.
In a lot of cultures, they don't like say the name of someone after they've died for a certain amount of time or something. Would Jewish have something like that would make them not want to?
I'm not sure whether there'd be in the Jewish culture, like it is in the Aboriginal culture.
Yeah.
But I don't think they had any problem in mentioning the death.
They definitely
They
mention
mention
it.
Jesus all the time, as,
Yeah.
in other contexts. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean more like as respect to the mother or something, like not to
Yeah.
mention that she's the mother of him.
Yeah. Anyway, if it was Mary, then where does Mary, the wife of Clopas, fit in?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's all speculative. Like, is Mary, the wife of Clopas, the same as Mary, the mother of James and Joseph? Well, might be, might not. And it doesn't really affect anything anyway. Yeah.
Can I ask, does anyone here share any of the scepticism that Bart had when he put up his, or what he believed, what Kevin presented his views, his agnosticism? Does anyone feel that they still have those doubts, or
No.
feel...
First thing I ever heard that was good about Bart Ehrman is what Roger shared with us tonight. That he put that thing up about praising the gospel, praising the Bible. Because every other time I've come across his name, it's always been in a pejorative context, or otherwise, when someone quotes what he said, it seems like rubbish to me.
Okay.
So it puts me off if I hear his name.
Yeah.
It depends a bit on your pre-existing bias. If you come at it pre-existing bias that it's all a load of rubbish, then you're going to be looking for it to be, or look for differences and see them as being differences. If you assume that it was all done by people at the time who knew what they were talking about, and that it fits up, then you're going to look for how it meshes together, which is kind of what Kevin did tonight, and show how it can fit together.
The more, I think, than the women, to me, it's the differences of the description of the tomb and it's being empty and things. That there's a lot of, that's quite a, I hadn't realised, but they're quite different. If you put them
one
together,
man, two men, one aim.
yeah, that's exactly right. There's more
one angel,
discrepancy
two
there.
angels.
To me, the women bit has never bothered me in that sense. But it's more about the description of what they found. There's the big discrepancy.
Yeah. Jeff Russell's going to have another stab at discrepancies in the resurrection again.
Okay.
He's away today, but so might leave some of those to him.
Oh, you know, I'm just saying that
Thanks for that.
those sort of things there, as you say, it's just the description of who might be there. But the bigger things are about the descriptions of what was there, what they found.
But, sorry,
I think that reflects also that women were lower class, so as John didn't even mention them in the ministries, by the looks of it.
yeah.
So they weren't important at all to him, being Jewish or whatever it is. And he
Well,
left
that's an
out
argument
there-
from silence. That's an argument from silence. All right.
Well, I think
just-
it's an omission that's quite. I mean, look at the other three have mentioned all the women, and he's the only one that doesn't. It stood out that there's a big blank there, you know.
Yeah.
So
But
they
then
were
again,
important.
he gives a lot more attention to Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
Correct, but maybe she's the representative woman in his mind. I don't know, the token woman or whatever.
The very special woman who had 7
Yeah, no,
demons
but I'm
cast
just
out
saying,
of her
it's,
soul.
yeah.
But I mean, to
The
me,
fallen woman,
it touches me that she was the woman that had 7 demons cast out of her. She must have had some real bad stuff in her life
Yeah.
that has gone. And to see her as the first woman to see the Lord alive after the resurrection, to me, is a very, very touching thing. Very touching thing.
Is it the same woman that washed Jesus' feet?
We don't know.
Some people think so.
Or is it the woman is the prostitute of Jesus?
Yeah, it's possible.
It doesn't actually say so. One interpretation is that it was Mary, the sister of Martha from Bethany, that washed Jesus' feet in one gospel. In another one, it doesn't mention it. who it was. So unlikely to be Mary Magdalene.
That's why I say what she says is right, because like you see, if she is the one who is a prostitute that Jesus have
There is nothing anywhere in the Bible that says
Yeah.
anything about prostitution.
Yeah, that's why you see, but because if that is the woman, that's why she feel that she's so unworthy. That
Yes.
only Jesus can love her.
Yes.
So that's why if the same person, I don't.
Yes. But I think you're bringing out a very good point here that Jesus' ministry to women was very special, very special, and the response that they had to him was some of the most beautiful descriptions within the Gospels because of what he did.
Just back on Bart Ehrman though. Bart Ehrman doesn't consider himself anti-Christian. He considers himself anti-evangelical or anti-fundamentalist. And so it's because he had a very strong inerrantist position and then kind of felt he could no longer hold it, then he kind of hit back really hard against that sort of Christianity. For better or for worse. I've read debates between him and Mike Lacona. A lot of the material that I got tonight was from Mike Lacona. And I don't think I showed my references. We got told off once for not using references, so I should include them. So references are Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, which is pretty obvious. Plutarch's Parallel Lives, so you can actually see them on the web. Now, why are the differences in the Gospels by Michael Lacona? And he's the one who's actually summarised, did a comparison between Plutarch's Parallel Lives, and he did around about 2 years study on it, and got out all these characteristics of compositional devices out of Plutarch's writings. So, basically he's saying that when people argue about differences in the Gospels, they usually do it from a modern mindset, and so and apologists try to harmonise or explain away the differences using a modern mindset, and quite often it sounds quite lame. And also the critics who say, aha, there's a discrepancy, and doing it from a modern mindset and not from a first century mindset. And if you actually then go back and analyse how people thought that in those days and what the expectations were, a lot of those problems just go away and it just seems irrelevant. Also in the fourth reference, the Ehrman-Lacona dialogue on the historical reliability of the New Testament, that was a debate between Mike Lacona and Bart Ehrman. And the point that Mike Lacona made was it is anachronistic to actually judge the Gospels by 21st century standards, and Bart Ehrman was kind of caught on the hop, really, because that's what he's doing, and he kind of redefined what anachronistic meant. So because one of the things that you find in the Gospels is that if you actually look at the sequence of events and stories in the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke, quite often Luke will swap them around and present them in a different order. So Bart Ehrman saying Luke is being anachronistic because he's getting the time order wrong. But really that's a misinterpretation of what anachronistic means. Because to say that swapping the sequence is a bad thing is being anachronistic.
Yeah.
Because we don't tend not to do it today because we want to present things in order. But they didn't care because their focus is on portraying the character of the individual.
Yep.
So you ordered your material
to do that.
Yeah.
And if it's in a different order from reality, who cares? That was their standard then.
Yeah. It is a rogue thought. I'll share it. It's not. I don't. Ancient drawings, artworks, used to show they didn't have perspective, and I don't mind that. I just think, oh, they're trying to draw the world from God's perspective, from God's point of view, where it's far distant things are in the same size as close things, and then they brought in art that everything had to have a perspective, and the close things were bigger and whatever. And to me, it's the same sort of change in assumptions that you're talking about. In the old biographies, if you want to even call that, I wouldn't call Gospels biographies, but they were written for a different purpose and from God's point of view. And if something happened before something else, it didn't matter because from God's eternal. And they weren't so hung up on what happened Tuesday, what happened Wednesday, what happened, when I was 1, what happened when I was 2. Who cares when you're a certain age?
Yeah.
And so I just see it's a similar sort of difference in mindset, that they're looking at the eternal perspective. Maybe it's just a suggestion anyway.
I suppose one of the things could be that if you did change it like that, the idea of cause and effect would be mixed around a bit too, wouldn't it? Like there may be certain events happen, perhaps the feeding the multitude and then walking on the water or something, that one cause the other or is related to it. If you swap them all over, so that might be a problem that would be universal, not only for us but also for in those days, if they meant there to be a connection.
Remember, they didn't have clocks, weren't invented till I think about 900 AD. So these things we got here and on the wall. And
No, that is
sundials are true, but you had to go outside. The fact that our lives are much more governed by time than they ever were.
There were a lot of references in the Gospel to the 4th hour or the 9th hour or the 3rd hour or the third watch of the night and all that sort of
There's
stuff.
a clock in Athens that was mechanical, that dates pre-2000.
Okay, I did not know that. Okay, well, stand corrected.
But those times were pretty rough too.
Oh, yeah,
So they might go 3rd hour, 6th hour, and if it was the 4.5 hour, they'd round it up or down.
Oh, of course, well, we would do the same.
And John has Jesus being crucified the 6th, and I think other has it the 3rd hour. But
Those different.
some have suggested that's just a rounding.
Yeah, it doesn't matter too much.
Yeah. Just to comment that.
But I think they had a good idea of time and being there for lunch and doing certain things at certain times. Yeah, I'm sure they had that.
Yeah.
They're a civilised society.
When the ladies went out into the lake,
That's right.
didn't they?
That's right. And you had to do a day's work and whatever it is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you judge it.
9.5 hours, and he's only been here 4 hours and 50 minutes.
Yeah. And of course, their idea of an hour was totally judged by how long the day was. So
They just looked in the sky and saw where the sun was, and that's morning when it's there, overhead, evening. I think during the night they might have cared which night watchman was on, should have been on duty and which was allowed to sleep. That's about it, really. Who clocks on, who clocks off. Not exactly what time it was, but what you had to do about it.
They burnt candles.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that was in the monastic times, so that was 1,000 years later.
That was in Jesus' time.
Yeah.
Did they? Oh, sorry, I didn't realise.
Having said that, we're talking about Judea and Samaria, where they may not have been as highly developed as the technology we're talking about, which might have been in Rome or in Athens or whatever.
Well, no, that's unfair to that. They were quite sophisticated civilisations, if you read up.
We're just not hung up on.
Well, they might have been in Herod's palace, but I don't necessarily know they were.
No, give it a go. No, the Sumerians and all those were quite clever guys.
Steve was saying that we're sort of more hung up on time. You didn't use that term. I'll use it for you. People that were cross-cultural whinge about island time. You make an arrangement for the locals to turn up, and if you're lucky if they turn up that day, and we get upset, and they go, "Well, what's the problem?"
There's a thing called Baptist time as well.
Baptist
Okay, well, probably.
Kevin, would you like to just make a comment on the difference between the biographical genre and a biography?
Well, basically they were biographies, but they were first century biographies, and we today we don't write like that. And so we tend to list the order of events, what happened in a person's life, and but their biographies, they were focusing on the person. And there were a lot of quotes in from Plutarch, where he might miss a major event, but he might list what a person said, which kind of reflected his character and the way he raised his eyebrow. And it was kind of an insight to what the person was like. And he might ignore a whole pile of other stuff which he didn't consider relevant to describe his personality and character.
So no mention of how Julius Caesar celebrated Christmas?
That was a trap.
Like you read pure history, they probably describe the battles, and Homer describes the build-up to being in the Odyssey is the journey back in pure chronological order.
Yeah.
So they understood historical time.
Yeah, well, there's another genre, which
Genre.
is Greco-Roman historiography. That's what they call that. And Luke Acts tends towards that.
Yes, true.
And like Acts especially is in the genre of Greco-Roman historiography, which is the next talk. Yeah.
We're not asking any questions this week then?
But even modern autobiographies, it tends to follow the flow, but you can then refer back to something in their boyhood to reflect on what might be happening now.
Yeah.
So that happens even in our.
They're switching the time.
Switching the time.
One thing that I've said with the ancient biographies, they're more like films now. Like if say Apollo 13, the leader at ground control says failure is not an option. All right, that's where a famous statement from that film, which obviously isn't that famous because you obviously haven't heard it.
Here we have.
Didn't pay attention.
But the guy never said that in reality, but they whacked it in for dramatic effect, and it was kind of was their attitude anyway. So there's a big word which is used quite often when you talk about these things. It's called verisimilitude. Have you heard it?
Yes.
Do you know what it means?
Yeah, exact truth. Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
No,
It means similar to the truth.
True.
Yes.
Vera
Intent
is truth.
Yeah.
Similitude, similar.
Oh, I was wrong.
Something. So it may not be the exact thing, but it's the sort of thing that is plausible. And so if they're actually recording people's speeches and they couldn't recall the exact words that they said, they'd invent some and whack it in so it kind of is consistent with the gist of what he said. And
we do
that was
ourselves.
considered okay.
When we can't remember something exactly, we'll quote it on the concept that we got, as though they've said it.
And this is the sort of thing that is done in films.
But interesting, we watched a thing on Voyager, and they actually quoted that thing you said. What he said, failure is not an option.
Yeah.
But when they slingshot the two capsules out into space to go, and they're still travelling.
Yeah. So who's seen The King's Speech?
Yes.
Yeah, good film, isn't it? And but there's all these conversations, personal conversations between the therapist and King George VI. King George V.
George Rush and I was like
Jeffrey Rush.
And,
Close enough.
But it's all invented, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's kind of the sort of thing that probably would have gone on, but they've invented it.
And they acknowledge that at the end.
Sorry?
They usually acknowledge that at the end, saying
these are based on historical events.
And indeed, in movies, sometimes you do have flashbacks. You'll go, and then you often start ahead, and then you'll move back to the sequence. So we do it.
Those are the movies.
So those are examples of verisimilitude.
And they're more powerful because of that. The ones where they just present the episodes,
Yes.
don't present the depth of the character.
Yeah.
So we're going to now say that the Gospels are like a cinema text.
Sorry? I would say when they actually says that Jesus says, did he actually use those exact words? Maybe, maybe not.
In most cases, not, I would think.
Yes.
Like if I was to tell somebody after tonight what you had said, I would use very few of your words, but I would still give
The gist of
what
it,
you said.
yeah. So it goes on in everyday life.